Hello, what is up? Welcome to episode 1 of Scouting Report, where I just go in depth and just learn about some StarCrafts. So today we're going to be taking a look at INnoVatioN versus soO. This happened. Sorry about that. This happened about last night on GSL. It was probably one of the most anticipated matches, purely because soO and INnoVatioN are both very, very good at this game. They're probably top 5 for each of their respective races. They're really good players, and I wanted to take a look at these games because something a bit unique happens in each of these games. We're gonna be primarily focused on soO, but so I wanted to take a look in depth at what happened with these two games and how spoilers for anyone who hasn't watched it yet. soO just takes it super cleanly 2-0 in these GSL games. So INnoVatioN is out, and we're gonna see exactly how consistent play and learning to adapt properly is what makes you better as a player. So without further ado, I'm just gonna get into it. There we go, we have the game here. Let me just lower the volume on that really quick. And so this is game 1 of the set. We have soO up here in the red, and then we have INnoVatioN down at the bottom here on Dust Towers. Now, normally this map is a fairly standard map for Legacy of the Void. It doesn't really favor any particular race, and immediately the first thing that you'll want to note here is that soO, he goes for a gas then pull timing, and all of this is before a hatchery. This is very unique. We'll see why in a second, but normally the opening that Zergs do starts with a hatchery, because in Legacy of the Void it's just so easy to get the hatchery first and just follow up from that. The hatchery goes down pretty much uncontested in pretty much every game. There's no real way for Terran to punish you going for a hatchery first, whereas in the previous games you could maybe do a 2-racks or bunker rush the early hatcheries. So here over on the Terran side, INnoVatioN is also doing something very standard, opening up with the barracks, getting a Reaper out, and starting up a second command center over at his natural. And one thing to note over here in the soO space, the gas that he was taking, actually we'll move back in the VOD a bit. This is the one downside of doing things the way I'm doing it right now, is that you kind of have to search through the VODs. But unfortunately we do not have replays of this game out. So we see here soO takes 2 drones off of the gas but leaves 1 mining. This is at 100 gas, so then he can get his metabolic boost ready. Now, this is already kind of weird, just because the gas was so much earlier than usual anyway, just because he got it as the first building that he made. So to continue mining any gas from it at all raises a couple of eyebrows. It is just 1 drone, so it's not gonna be too big of an effect on the game, but we'll see how that comes into play later. So now here's where this opening gets very has a unique kind of place in the meta right now. So when you go hatchery first as Zerg, the timing of when your hatchery finishes lines up with when the timing of when your spawning pool finishes. So at this moment, when your second hatchery finishes, you can get out 2 zerglings, or 2 pairs of zerglings, my bad. At this exact same time, also, a reaper will come out, but because your 2 hatcheries only just now finish with this hatchery first build, you will only be able to start production on 2 queens. The way we have INnoVatioN opening here, or soO, forgive me, the gas first and then the early pull allows him to get this queen right here much earlier than if we were to be doing the standard hatchery first build. And at the same time, that second hatchery is already pretty much done. So this is just it's a unique kind of opening to get early queens out at the cost of a bit of drones. I honestly don't know how much the economy is affected by taking this early gas early pull, but the biggest thing to note is that the queen is out early. Therefore, this Reaper has much less chance of doing any real damage. With a hatchery first build, you'll just have 2 pairs of slowlings to hopefully chase it off the creep. And if it manages to sneak around the back over like a long mineral lines or whatever, then you're probably going to lose a drone or 2. Unless you're managing them very well and making extractors to save them and whatnot, which honestly is just like a pretty big amount of control for a very small benefit. Instead, he just has this 1 queen out, and now INnoVatioN can't do anything with that early Reaper, which is very nice. So we see INnoVatioN doing the very standard build back at home, gets down the starport early, has a 2 Hellions out quickly, and now we see soO taking his 3rd because he finally eventually got the money to take it. And now at this point, in a normal game, your lings just start having speed, and his lings have been having speed. So that's kind of nice. But the biggest difference is that soO has far more queens than you would if you went the hatch first build. Because the pool was so much earlier than usual, he right now has 4 queens with a 5th queen on the way, and this is very early in the game. So we see as soO gets the second base fully saturated and throws down his 3rd, he'll put down a roach horn and 2 gases here. These 2 gases probably just going to be going toward making roaches, ravagers, or whatnot. Yeah. But he doesn't take a 4th gas up in his main. He's been mining from it the entire time with that 1 drone, and once that 1 drone got up to 100 mineral or 100 gas, he throws in the 2 extra drones onto that extractor and starts taking the double extractor and working toward his mid-game roach army composition. He also has the 3 queens. Having the queens early not only doesn't mean you're very defensive, not defensive, but rather you're safe. You have a safe defensive opening. It also means you can push out a lot of creep tumors. So he's already got creep tumors connecting creep from his main over to his 3rd. So INnoVatioN is doing this Hellbat push. And this is another reason why soO's opening is very interesting, because normally you wouldn't have this many queens to just try and defend this early push. You just kind of have to flood with lings and eventually just sort of outnumber. Only difference there is that this hatchery would already be finished, so you would have a little bit of extra larva production, but you wouldn't have nearly as many queens to defend this. Right now, he has almost 5 queens out to defend against 6 Hellbats, and, well, Queens are just very strong defensive early game. Hellbats aren't going to be doing too much damage to the Queens, so they'll be able to defend handedly. And we'll be able to see that right now. Behind this, INnoVatioN has created the Liberator, as they're pointing out here. The Liberator is going to siege up here. The moment that soO sees the Liberator, he puts down a Spore Crawler kind of behind the mineral line there. And I'm not sure if he has a Spore Crawler also behind his main, but I'd assume that's the case just because it's probably the strongest defensive option. And 5 queens versus 6 hellbats. No queens die, just transfuse them to full health. Very, very strong defensively. This Liberator isn't actually ending up gonna be doing much. That was horribly phrased. That was the worst English in the history of ever. My bad. But because soO has his timing worked out where he pushes out very, very, very quickly. Oh, my bad. He pushes out very quickly the extra queens, and also he has a timing set up where his Roach Warren finishes. He creates 4 roaches that immediately morph into Ravagers. And the cute thing about that is that 4 roaches or 4 Ravager shots will kill a Liberator. So this is a very good defensive timing for him as well. As you know, the general early game theme here, early mid game theme, is that soO is playing very defensively with this build, having the 5 queens early to be able to defend any kind of early game attack, having the 4 Ravagers out to deal with any kind of Liberator siege. These are all defensive maneuvers, and it's just a setup for soO to be able to go back and just keep droning up. He's got 6 drones in production now that he's held off every any kind of early game aggression with the Hellbats and the Liberators. So now we see 2 evolution chambers being put down once the layer finishes up. Also puts down another extractor. He does have those 5 coins, so this Banshee is like no problem. It's not gonna be doing too much damage. And yeah, now he sees the 5 queens walking around again. Just has to walk out. So this base is getting saturated very, very quickly. Nothing but drones in production, and starts the glial reconstitution in order for roaches to have more speed. Hide your face. INnoVatioN back at his home, going very, very standard, adding on the barracks to be able to do any kind of mid-game pressure. And also just to make some semblance of an army. Those 2 evolutions chambers finished, and ooh, nice snipe. Getting the oversteer because he did see the Banshee had cloak. But as soon as the 2 evolution chambers finished, he gets a +1/+1. And also, he finished. One thing to note is that he finished saturating his third. Finished saturating the third minerals. Finished saturating the minerals, and immediately from there, he puts down double gas on that third, and also throws up an infestation pit. The infestation pit is pretty good tech choice. It synergizes very, very well with the Ravagers, and that's a very, very heavy damage army comp. Also the holding units in place while throwing the corrosive bile over them is very, very strong. So we see INnoVatioN starting up medevac production here, going 1-1, and probably gonna be doing a 1-1 kind of timing attack with some siege tanks being picked up and dropped off by the medevacs and a bunch of marines. And this is also a good push designed for being able to safely start securing the 3rd and the 4th. Terran tends to take a very quick 4th, especially on this map because Zerg can't really do too much about it. And here we notice this Banshee out here taking some very early kills on these creep tumors. Now, normally it looks like a looks like a super normal play. You want to deny creep as Terran as much as possible. But because INnoVatioN, all of his early game aggression has been held off up until now, it's actually kind of a tell. This kind of triggers soO to mentally get ready for an attack, because Terran never wants to engage on creep. Terran will take engages on creep, but obviously when you're on creep, the engagement is not in your favor necessarily. So at the same time, soO, he has the third base completely saturated with the gases and everything. At this point, he already has this timing set up where he's going to start making a bunch of units. And also, if we go back to the game, we see this hive tech starting up too. This is just a macro hatch, not too much to think about there. But he's started making a bunch of units. His +1/+1 timing is sort of lined up closely with INnoVatioN's +1/+1 timing. So we realize now that soO's entire build is centered around the Terran standard mid game, early game push oriented timings, where any kind of early Hellion run by or Hellbat push gets thwarted just by queens. Same with any Banshee or Liberators, because by the time Banshees or Liberators arrive, soO already has a lair to be able to get vision or deal with it, and he also has 4 Ravagers in order to be able to deal with those Liberators. And now he's starting up unit production, probably just so then he could safely take the 4th over here. Zerg never wants to take this base over here just because the cliff behind it is just the Terran's wet dream. So now he's making a huge amount of roaches. Also knows that INnoVatioN is pushing out with the very small Banshee tail, and he's putting down that 4th base. So because the 3rd base is already completely saturated and he's teching up, biggest thing that Zerg would want to do in this situation is not, you don't really want to make drones. Drones aren't going to be too helpful. You can't drone up your base and have it be efficiently mining unless it's completely finished. And he just started throwing down his base. So what do? Make units. And also when you're teching up, as quickly as soO does to get to the hive with the infestors and whatnot, just making units to be able to be secure in this mid game, pushing toward the late game, is very, very important. So up until now, soO has been playing very defensively. Now he's starting to make the units in order to be able to take a proper engage. He has like the 2 infestors on the way. And this push here isn't too scary, just because Terran is right now completely on the creep. He knows he has to scan to kill the creep, and he can't push up any further, otherwise he'll just get wrecked by units on creep. So all soO has to do is back up, wait for more units, even though this is a pretty decent size army, but he'll back up, wait for more units to come in, so then he could take a straight up engagement and just win, because he is on the higher tech units, and he is going to be able to use those for more efficiency in these engagements and take a much more favorable trade. So this is a huge swell of units just pushing forward, and that scares off INnoVatioN, because if INnoVatioN loses everything that he has there, then Zerg is just going to push out and win the game. So more barracks are being thrown down. We don't see +2/+2 started from soO. which is interesting because usually when you're doing upgrades, you want to just keep chugging along, you want to keep going. Oh, and there we go. We see the +1 melee and the +2 carapace. As soon as the hive finishes, wonder if we'll see the adrenal. I think he kind of wants to. I feel like in this situation he already is starting up all the tech. He should be starting his adrenal glands, but he puts down that Ultralisk Cavern as soon as the hive is finished here, and now he has his mid-game very strong army that he can just add on to. The Infestors and Ravagers are very strong. This is a cute side push by INnoVatioN. It's not going to do too much damage or any damage whatsoever. And we'll see. This is actually a huge army by soO. The drones on this base over here were mostly transferred from his main, and maybe a couple of drones were made to push onto that base. But now soO is pushing in to take a fight. INnoVatioN realizes he can't really fight that, so he'll just pick up and run back. soO just running around being defensive, making sure that not too many drones die, making sure his base is secure, because then this fourth base is so much earlier than INnoVatioN's, and as long as soO knows that as long as he can wait macro up and get his ideal endgame army, he will win the game. Just because he knows that Terran hasn't scouted any of his hive tech and doesn't know that Ultralisks are on the way. Now soO saw that on the way. He'll send a couple lings up here to deal with the drop. Also a very small group of roaches and whatnot. That was a very good unit separation actually. Usually people will run back and forth between their bases just to defend with their like huge army. Just a couple units splitting off will be able to deal with drops properly. Now he catches INnoVatioN's army sort of out of place. Almost takes a very good engagement. And INnoVatioN will start pushing up this ramp. But now INnoVatioN sees that there's an Ultralisk with that army. If I'm INnoVatioN, I'd be scared. Back in the base, I'd throw down Ghost Academy and start more Liberator production. So we'll see. That's a good fungal on the front units here, and we'll also see the fungal here from the two Infestors. And just because the army of soO is so much just more efficient than INnoVatioN's, he takes this fight by a landslide. There's like zero chance for INnoVatioN to win anything there. The supply of between the players is actually like a huge 50 supply difference, and also not to mention soO's supply is much more efficient as well. So we'll just at this point soO is just so much higher on the tech and has his macro going up so much quicker, even has a 5th base being put down there. There's not much INnoVatioN can do, just because he hasn't responded properly. He hasn't put down that Ghost Academy and can't deal with those Ultralisks whatsoever. Regardless of how inefficient soO tries to use them, those Ultralisks are always going to be very cost efficient. So here we see a very standard fight. No Infestors to speak of with this army, although those would again up the efficiency of these units, but at this point there's not much INnoVatioN can do. He has no bank, he can't really replenish this army quickly, whereas soO has a very big bank here, and he's also starting to mining way more than INnoVatioN. Really at this point soO just has to make units and win. Making sure the Ravagers target down the Liberators with their Corrosive Bile is probably the most standard thing that you'd be wanting to do in these kinds of engagements, and just because none of your army can actually shoot up and deal with them properly, and Liberator's Siege does huge amounts of damage to Ultralisk, to Ravagers, to any kind of Zerg army. Just does a really big amount of damage. So now we see soO kind of deliberating a little. Nope, pushing back once his reinforcements arrive. And we're just gonna see soO eventually win. Very nice play. This is very standard play by soO. Which is a very decent starting point of how we see the meta in Legacy of the Void for the ZvT matchup. So, one thing that we want to note about that match is that soO pretty much was defense, just made sure that he could live through any kind of early game stuff, any early mid game pushes, any early mid game timings, and just eventually come back with his ideal end game army, and just sort of be so much quicker ahead in the tech that INnoVatioN can't deal with it. So that early game though, the opening is very unique to soO. I actually haven't seen this opening used anywhere else. Getting the very quick queens makes sure that you're safe, although your economy does start up somewhat slowly. Yeah, and I think probably one of the biggest things that lost INnoVatioN the fight, or INnoVatioN the game, is that he didn't respond properly with his tech switch. When you see Ultralisk, you cannot continue to just go Marine Marauder. You're going to lose the game if you do. That army is just not able to do enough damage to deal with the Ultralisk. So what you need to do is either put down a Ghost Academy as soon as possible and start making ghosts for snipes, or put down a second starport, put a reactor on that, and make a huge amount of Liberators. But the biggest problem with that is that Ravagers are already part of the Zerg army, so the Liberators are not necessarily going to get 100% efficiency. It really is just going to be able to secure you outside of like a third or a fourth from Zerg really pushing in and just killing your stuff until you can get the ghosts out to deal with the Ultralisk. So just very methodical play by soO, and we'll already just jump in really quick to this game 2. So we see soO putting down that 17 gas, 17 pool again. It seems that he favors that. One thing to note is that the pool and the gas pretty much go out down at the same time. So he waits till he floats like 225 minerals ish before putting down the gas, and then just throws down the pool at the same time. So he's putting in the drones and gas, getting that expansion right after. So this is the same opening as in the previous game. And actually in this game, we'll see a small adaptation to INnoVatioN's build. He's not going to totally change what he does in order to deal with this early game opening and try to create more openings for damage. Like, he's not just gonna be, oh well, I saw him do 5 early queens, therefore I'm just gonna put down 6 barracks with 2 engineering bays and do a 1-1 super fast timing with a huge amount of units, because Marines and Marauders kind of deal with queens pretty easily. He's not gonna start going all in just because of that read on the previous game. He's going to do the same very basic build, putting down the barracks, getting the 1 Reaper, then expanding, starting a reactor on his barracks and throwing down a factory behind that, while soO is also doing the same build. But there is a very small adjustment that allows INnoVatioN to actually do a decent amount of damage in this game compared to the last one. Making the Marines. Got a factory almost completed. Probably going to be throwing down a starport as soon as possible. Seeing that the gas is kind of floating pretty hard. Yep, starport's going down. Lifting the barracks and the factory to swap and start his Hellion production. Pretty much the same thing. Cute move there by soO. Makes the drone make an extractor just to be safe and not lose the drone. As soon as the 2 sets of speedlings that he makes comes out, then he's happy to go ahead and throw down his expansion. That 1 drone was mining gas the entire time. And then now we actually saw that soO had enough money to create a lair, but instead he went ahead and created this queen here. We also saw in the last game that around this time, when soO gets at 100 gas for the lair, he'll throw up 2 gases and the roach warren. But this game he's only throwing up 1 gas and mining out of the main one. So that's like a very small adjustment. I'm not exactly sure what triggers that. Maybe it's the fact that he didn't get the kill on the early Reaper this game. But we'll see how soO and INnoVatioN try to deal with this. Now in this game, INnoVation's early push build, instead of making that Liberator and then going with the Banshees after that, he'll make this dropship. And we'll see how that kind of plays into it. Dropships are pretty good for that Hellbat push, just because they can heal Hellbats and shit, right? Pretty standard. And now he made the lair and put down this other gas, getting those quite a bit later than the previous game. And now he has the roaches already in production as the 3rd is starting up. And here we see the Hellbat push starting up again. We only have 3 queens up at the front, and now this medevac is full of the Marines. So that small adjustment here makes this push so much more powerful. Previously in the other game, he had 5 queens to deal with 6 Hellbats. The 6 Hellbats didn't have anything to heal them, and they weren't backed by anything other than a Liberator that just ended up not doing any damage and dying. Here we see that he has 4 Hellbats and 6 Marines. So 4 Hellbats and 6 Marines is 100% always going to kill 5 queens. The queens just can't take that engagement unless they're like full mana and can transfuse each other, but it's early game, you're not going to be stockpiling your mana very hard on them. And also at the same time, the dropship there helps make the push even stronger just by virtue of being able to heal. So it's your transfuses competing with his medevac healing, and it's just a matter of which side can DPS more. And well, obviously Marines are a very high DPS unit. So this allows this early game push, this small adjustment allows this early game push to end up being so much more powerful. And oh, it's not actually just 4 Hellions, it's 6 Hellions. And now we see soO, he did start that unit production, started making the roaches, has like 2 roaches and a small set of lings here. But these 5 queens just aren't going to be able to deal with this much damage here. And we'll see what happens. So already loses 1 queen. These Marines are doing so much damage. Even with all the transfuses, loses like his entire army, loses 3 queens, adds on more Hellions, maybe loses 1 drone, 2 drones, going to lose. Very good control by soO, being able to kite effectively there, having most efficiency out of his units as possible. Those 3 roaches are very, very low health, and they're surviving. And just to kill that. But the biggest thing is he managed to take out 4 of the queens. There's only 1 queen left, and soO started another queen in production. And now, if we look over to INnoVatioN's production, he has those banshees on the way. This time, because of that small adjustment with the dropships and adding on the marines to that push, he took out a huge amount of the queens. There's only 2 queens out on the field right now, as opposed to 5. Now, because there are fewer queens, the banshees are able to do so much more damage. But one thing that INnoVatioN didn't see coming, and one reason why INnoVatioN loses this game is because, the thing that he doesn't see coming is that soO actually way overmade units to be able to deal with that early attack. So now he has his entire army streaming across the map down here, just going to straight up the ramp this way, just gonna go straight in there, and there's nothing that INnoVatioN can do because he made a few bad choices. He did have those Hellions rallied over there, but that just means even fewer units for defense, and he made the 2 banshees here. He went and did a double banshee play. So this banshee is, pay attention please, it is going to be held off by these 2 queens. The second banshee sees the attack coming, but at this point he doesn't have anything to defend, and behind this soO is just going to drone up. So we see nothing being able to defend here, and we go, well, this just looks super easy. Why did this happen? We have like 2 Hellions in the back here, just like 2 bunkers on the way. Those bunkers aren't even full with any kind of units. How come soO doesn't have any production going? Well, one thing to note that is very underneath the surface. It's not something that you really concentrate on during these games. I got my notes over here, so let me check this out. Forgive me, I'm reading through my notes because I wasn't paying attention properly. So, here is what happened. soO had to make the units to defend against that Hellion push, that Hellbat push. And obviously he was going down the Roach tech path. Roach is very, very strong against the Hellions and Hellbats. They do the bonus damage to the light, and they also take barely any damage from them. Now, INnoVatioN, back at home, while he was doing that push out, what he did, or what he had to do, was stop the Hellbat production once he saw the roaches coming out, lift off that factory, put it somewhere else, and then he started up another building in place of that reactor. And now that factory, as we see here in the game, that factory has a tech lab on it. That entire time that INnoVatioN was doing that push, he didn't have any kind of production whatsoever going on in this factory, and he had only started to add on these barracks here that we see here. So those weren't doing much production either. Really, these 2 barracks had just sort of gotten up. This barracks was the only one still making units, but he was only able to fill up that one bunker with like 2 marines, and this bunker also has 2 marines. That's a very paltry force. The only thing that would have saved INnoVatioN here would be choosing to not make these banshees. Now, you might be going, but wait. Earlier you said he killed those queens in order to make the banshees work this time. Those queens were like the biggest inhibition for him to be able to make any damage happen in the previous game, just because he had those 5 queens and his early game pressure didn't do anything. This time he killed the 4 queens and the banshees still didn't do anything. What's up with that? The banshees had to be pulled back in order to deal with the army that soO was shooting across the map. If those 2 banshees were still over in soO's base, they 100% would have done a bunch of damage. But because he made banshees instead of liberators, he lost this game. What INnoVatioN should have known was soO had a bunch of roaches made in order to deal with his early timing. Now, if you lose your army to those roaches, what is soO gonna do with them? He's not just gonna sit there with like the huge 24 or 25 amount of supply that he dumped into that army just to deal with your stuff, your early gameplay. He's gonna push out with them. He's gonna do something actively on the map with them, and you have to be ready for them to come to your base. Now, if he instead made liberators instead of those banshees, this attack would not have worked, and INnoVatioN would have been in a very, very strong spot to start drop ships, or start drops and aggression mid-game instead of having to deal with this huge push. That's pretty much going to be the reason why he loses the game. So if those 2 liberators were sieged like right at his entrance, he wouldn't be losing this much. Finally gets the siege tank out. That's finally going to be able to deal with these roaches here. But the lings are still sort of separated, doing a bunch of damage over here. 21, 22. 22 SCVs killed. That is catastrophic. It's actually horrible. And because the front door was open, even more lings are just gonna stream on through. It's gonna end up with 26 SCVs lost from this very, very small push that he could have dealt with if he made liberators. Now, we have back here at soO's base, he's got the spire going up, he's got the double evo chambers up. Probably going to be getting 1-1 very soon. Right as I say it, the 1-1 starts happening, and probably going to be throwing down a baneling nest. Has the spore in each base just because he did see the cloak banshees early. And now we see INnoVatioN doing that same mid-game push that he did in the previous game to across the map that almost cleared out a lot of creep and set up position outside of soO's base. So those banshees are going to come out. They look like they're going to be doing a lot more damage. They would have done a lot of damage if they were here earlier, but unfortunately soO is already teched up to that lair. And now he's just so far behind in terms of the tech and unit composition and economy a bit. One thing to note is that soO doesn't actually have that much stuff, just general stuff. He was too busy the entire time behind that. Because early game he had to make so many units, those units were used to attack, right? But because those units were not economy, he kinda had to catch up to INnoVatioN. Just doing damage on top of that early game setback is a very, very nice bonus. Here we see these mutas just pretty much killing everything. Those are some dead mariners. Takes out that dropship, and he's also gonna be kind of poking around. 6 mutas is a very, very small amount. Normally they're not going to be doing much damage, but because INnoVatioN dedicated so much, I forgot to switch the scene. Let's go back, shall we? Kills off that small army, pushes in here, kills a lot of dead marines. Kills what? You don't kill a dead marine. Kills a lot of marines dead. There we go. And takes out that dropship there. Kills even more marines. Yada yada. One thing to note, INnoVatioN actually has a pretty decent amount of stuff. Because now his production has actually started up. When soO initially went into INnoVatioN's base to start doing that counter push, INnoVatioN's production had just finished. So now it's already ready and to go and starting up. He even had that third command center to continually make a bunch more SCVs and drop a lot of mules in order for him to catch up to that economically after that 26 worker killed push. So because of that, because he had to focus so much money toward his economy and just making sure he's still into the game, he had to cut a couple of corners. We see very, very few missile turrets, and he's going to end up losing quite a bit of SCVs here. One, you might be wondering, like, well, how come this game soO decided to go mutas instead of where the previous game he went the very, very fast infestation pit and teched up to the hive? Well, this game, he did see that very early commitment, and I say very early commitment. Commitment is a very, very big part of that statement. Very early commitment to the banshees. He had 3 cloaked banshees. Banshees are very expensive in gas themselves. Also, having a cloak upgrade is going to make it even more expensive. So he has to do some damage with that. INnoVatioN sees that, he's going to go, well, your banshees can't go air to air. I have mutas. I'm going to go kill you with that. Also, at the same time, this map is very good in terms of base layout for mutas. With the other map, you have this triangle formation where you have a base here, a base here, and a base here. Having that triangle formation means that anything that walks within that triangle is dead. And also, one base kind of protects the other. In this map, your base is in a line. So this base here at the end, these 2 bases here, are not going to be able to defend each other. Meaning, if you have, say for example in your triangle, you have turrets set up at each one, in order to get to the base in the back, you have to fly through missile turrets already. In this game, you could just sort of swoop around, go to the back, do damage there, and also your units do not have to travel as far with this kind of triangle setup, this base god setup. Your units are usually gonna be somewhere in the middle, and then it can respond as appropriate. In a line, you can only kind of go along this one path, and that's gonna take longer to respond to any kind of aggression. So the mutas are going to be his tech choice for lair this game. Getting overlord speed, making even more mutas, and we see that INnoVatioN is actually pushing out. soO spots out with that overseer and that one muta that was kind of added to the control group and on the way. It's gonna kill these back rocks. Actually killing those back rocks on this map is pretty important for any kind of mid-game push. If Terran manages to set up position outside there, you kind of just lose the game. Can't really do much about it. And actually, this Baneling nest is very, very, very late from soO. He doesn't even have Baneling's speed, as you can see here. They're not rolling, but it's late because he wanted to get super huge amount of mutas early game. This is actually a pretty big amount. 16 mutas for this stage in the game. That's a lot of mutas. And now kind of see soO pushing out here, and you kind of think like, wait, isn't that kind of dumb? INnoVatioN just has so much more stuff, but the creep that INnoVatioN had just pushed back is actually still sort of in place. So that's kind of the best engagement you're gonna get in order to slow down that army in terms of its size. Making that push out is going to make sure that once he gets here, because he has so much less stuff than he would have, this is a lot easier to deal with. And actually, we're gonna see INnoVatioN lose after this. He can't deal with the 1/1 lings, as well as this huge flock of mutas. Whittled down to 11 mutas, but it's a lot of stuff that INnoVatioN lost that he cannot replenish. And now we see another big mistake. It's very barely visible in the upper corner here. We see a bunch of units just sort of dying. INnoVatioN did the newbie thing and just sort of rallied his stuff across the map. He does have this small amount of units here, just kind of here to defend the counter push, but he's already lost so much stuff just sort of flying across the map that this is just not gonna be enough, and we're gonna see him lose. The mutas outnumber the Marines here, which is in a position you'll pretty much never want to be in. If you have more mutas than Marines, like you can't really do anything about it. These mutas are gonna camp over this production now. The correct procedure, dealing with Marines one by one with mutas, is so much more efficient than anything else you can do. soO's just gonna keep on streaming units, and even doesn't have any Banelings in here because he doesn't need to look for the efficient trade, because INnoVatioN just doesn't have any stuff to deal with this. And we're just gonna see him win and take out those turrets. GG. Wow. Amazing. So we saw that in these two games soO went for the exact same opener and also managed to win both games with very small adjustments, assuming that the first game is his primary build. Second game, he did make that small adjustment with like the gas and layer being later, the third gas and layer being later, but he still went down that roach tech path early. This time he split off into mutas instead of infestors, whether or not that be by map choice and whatnot. And in both games we saw that he was very defensive with his units. The first game he was just defensive up until he got his hive tech up. Second game he had to defend that early game push because INnoVatioN's small adjustment managed to make it do so much more damage. So once he defended that, he just used those units to try to get as much value out of them as possible. INnoVatioN makes a small slip up, doesn't make liberators, and ends up losing the game because of that. 26 SCVs killed with that push. Not too much you can do to come back from that. And even from there he continues to take like inefficient trades, and soO ends up handedly winning those games because of his very solid play. So here's maybe a couple questions you might be thinking of, like or a couple statements, whatever. Actually, we're just gonna redo this because I cannot properly sort out my thoughts. The first thing that I want to say is that this gas pool opening I've never seen in Terran. ZvT, I mean. Zerg versus Terran. So, one thing that I personally want to do is go into a game, check out how many drones we have at certain times compared to the hatch first builds, and also see how much more quicker those queens come out as opposed to the hatch first build, and just see how like those things line up economically. I actually really like the soO style. Wonder if this very quick 2-0 by him is going to be the shaper of the rest of the Zerg vs Terran meta in the early and mid game for the next however long this patch goes on anyway. So one thing that you can think of is, or that you may be thinking, is what can Terran do against this? Like what is the proper response? Well, I think that Terran has to be very diligent with their scouting. It's normally that Zerg has to be super on par with their scouting. You have to that's how it was in Wings of Liberty and Heart of the Swarm, that Zerg couldn't really force anything, and always had to react to how Protoss and Terran were doing their kind of stuff. And there's still elements of that within this Heart of the Swarm, or Legacy of the Void. But now Zerg is also able to force things, and one of the biggest things that Zerg forces is some kind of response to their late game army. So I think it's very important for Terran to figure out when Hive is going up. What Zergs will usually do is tech up to Hive as they're expanding, and also only make units behind that. And this is usually around to the expanding to the 4th or 5th, like that kind of timeline. So what Terran needs to do is figure out when the Hive is going up, and the moment they see Hive go up, they need to throw down the Ghost Academy immediately, because the only way you're going to be able to deal with the Ultralisk in the early late game is with the Ghosts. And also Ghosts are very strong against Infestors, good against Broodlords, and good against the Ultralisk. Just Snipe is very Snipe in terms of mana spent for the damage it does, for the amount of food that it kills from the Zerg, is super efficient. So yeah, I'm not too sure what the Zerg proper response to Ghosts would be, just because we've pretty much never seen Ghosts used by Terran in ZvT, unless it is for like the occasional like triple, quadruple nuke play or whatever. But I think the answer to Zerg late game in ZvT lies in the Ghost, and we'll just have to see where it goes from there. And maybe you're saying something like, oh, Zerg is Imba, the fucking bullshit ass race. Fuck off. That's all I can fucking say. Fuck off. There's things that aren't explored in every single race to be able to deal with the Zerg, and I think there are more things that can be done in order to make sure that Zerg isn't just rolling over other people in these games. You may be pointing to win rates and whatnot. I don't know. We don't know from purely win rates whether or not something is balanced. Good example is early ZvT in Wings of Liberty, pretty much super Terran favored, but that was pretty much only in the early game. The 2 Rex builds, the 5 Rex Reaper builds, like these were very strong in the early Wings of Liberty. Zerg just lost games straight up, but once it kind of made it to the mid-late game, the win rates evened out. So I'm not too sure exactly um, when Zergs are winning games. I'm assuming it's pretty much mid-late game, just because that's when our very, very strong tech comes out. But I don't know if we call that overpowered. I think other races just sort of need a way to keep up with Zerg tech, and whether or not that lies in like a ghost or scouting, or maybe a new way to use certain units is kind of discovered or happened upon, then we'll kind of cross that road when we get to it. As of right now, I think there is more exploring to be done. That doesn't mean no balance should be changed whatsoever. It's just I think it's a little too early to say whether or not something is overpowered. So that'll wrap up the first episode of Scouting Report. I don't know if I'm going to be doing this regularly. Perhaps maybe when I find games interesting. Hopefully this was somewhat informative. I'm just going to chill out, play some SC2 maybe. No, actually it's like 2:30 a.m. This is actually a horrible time to be doing this. But I hope that this was informative, and yeah, tune in for the next show. Bye bye.